Hey, today on the show, we've got actor Reed Diamond, and he's acted in a ton of great stuff, including Moneyball, 24, Wayward Pines, Billions, and tons more. And he's going to be talking about growing up in New York in the 70s and the culture back then, not only with the film and TV and theater, but also music. And then he's got lots of great stories about working with Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Malcolm McDowell, plus some exciting stuff he's got coming out soon, including the new show about Watergate called Gaslit with Sean Penn and Julia Roberts, and so much more. So don't go anywhere.
You're the professional.
No, that's what I always, it's so funny because I interview all these musicians and stuff, and I'm always asking about lighting. I'm like, don't you guys have to, you're on stage. Don't you have to know the lighting and all that? Like, I just play guitar. Somebody else does that.
Exactly.
Is that how you are too? With like, do you just go and act and somebody else does the lighting and tells you where to stand and the blocking and all that?
Well, there are paid professionals who do all that, but you definitely learn it as an actor. You get, especially as you become an older actor, you definitely learn your lighting. And nowadays, because we got to do all this stuff from home, everyone's got to build their own little movie studios in their houses. So I've got, grand worth of just lighting in the house.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So did you and that's just from your experience on being on set and stuff, or did you have somebody come over and help you set it up, or?
We live in, it's 2022. I've got this magical thing called the interweb, right? And I can just look it up on YouTube, right? So I'm learning about like 3-point lighting, but no, because it started before COVID, right? We started having to do a lot more. If you had to audition or meet or anything like that, you had to do it yourself. And then since lockdown, now it's only that way. I don't know that it'll ever go back to going into rooms the way we used to always go into rooms. So
really? But don't you lose something with that, with being in?
Yeah, you lose a lot. You lose so much because I find, when you're auditioning, personally, I think that most of it happens just when you walk through that door. It's like sort of that exchange of energy between you and them. And if you dig them, if they dig you, and they can get a sense of you. So that's the hardest part right now I think, is that they're seeing your performance. They're seeing whatever the character is that you're going to do for them, but they don't really get a sense of, per se, unless they know you, who you are.
That's interesting you say that about the energy, because I was going to ask you about that. Like, is that kind of when you learned that you wanted to go into acting? And because I know your dad worked at a TV station or something. So like, when did you ever go to his set and just like feel like energized, like, yes, this feels right?
Well, that's so funny because it's great to bring up my dad, because my dad worked at Channel 9. He worked at WOR. Where are you right now, Chuck?
I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So this was in New York City. So it was a local TV station in New York, but they were still, it's so funny how quickly things have changed recently, but they were still in the 70s and the 80s. It would be recognizable to like a 1950s, 1960s television studio. So what they did, they only had one stage, one studio. So all the sets were arrayed around the wall. So you'd have the news, you'd have Romper Room, you'd have the Joe Franklin Show set. You'd even had, before they moved to an actual bowling alley, they'd made a bowling alley for the game show Bowling for Dollars. And all you would do, just like how they did back in live TV days, they just moved the camera around to each set and then light that set. I mean, it was it was really, it was in a magical place. Because I spent a lot of time at my dad's work. There were 2 directors there at the station who directed all of the shows. So I kind of had free run of the place, and it was sort of a magical world to live in, which I kind of got to revisit when I did Good Night and Good Luck, because when we were doing sort of the CBS stuff from Edward R. Murrow's period, there were a lot of similarities. In fact, the character that I played, which I didn't even know until after I'd done the movie, and my dad told me, the character I played had been one of my dad's bosses at one of his first TV jobs, which is crazy, right? But it's a small world in New York, but it was a magical place to play, because I'd sit while even if I was very quiet, I could just be somewhere else on the stage while they were shooting the news or shooting one of the shows, and I'd sit on. I remember what's exciting when you're a kid, chairs with wheels. They had rolly chairs, and I'd roll back and I'd play with some of the props from Romper Room. I remember they had those inflatable clowns that used to punch, and so I'd
Oh
play with,
yeah, I learned about those in psychology class. I think they did experiments with those, right?
Probably, but they'd use them on the Romper Room, and those were toys when in the 70s. But so it was kind of a magical place to grow up in. And then, my dad, he was a lot of the shows he directed were live, so it's live TV, the news and things like that. But usually most of the shows, even if they weren't live, they directed them and they shot them as if they were live. So he'd be in the control room, and now I've got more power and bandwidth in my house than they had in that entire control room, but it's an all analog world. And it was really sexy because I remember it felt like you're in mission control. I mean, it was called the control room, and my dad would be in there and he'd have an analog chromatic stopwatch, and he'd be like, camera 2, camera 3. Because he had half hour to get the thing in. They knew when the commercials, but there's nothing digital. It was all, and he always seemed like he seemed super cool. He was super sexy. I think everyone was attracted to him because it's such a powerful position, and there's so much pressure and stress, and he handled it with such grace. So it was really cool to be part of that in that world. And then he directed this show called The Joe Franklin Show. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I've heard you talking about it on other interviews and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So so Joe Franklin, Joe Franklin was this amazing guy, and he kind of invented in some ways that format, the talk show format, the Tonight Show and stuff. And he was a New York guy, and he was a radio guy, and he had this, and then a lot of people know it because they parodied. Oh, I used my Juilliard. I haven't warmed up my lips this morning. They parodied it on SNL with Billy Crystal playing him, but it was like a really cool show because you'd have all of these celebrities, and you'd have all of these people who were never going to be celebrities, like I say, who play organ in Piscataway, New Jersey at some, Vinny's Bar and Grill, but he treated them all like they were stars, and it was magical. So I'd sit there and all these people come through. I mean, Bing Crosby and Barbara Streisand and all of these people would come through and be on the show. So I was exposed to that. So it was kind of it's a piece of time that doesn't exist anymore. That world of live TV in New York, and it was still, even for the the biggest city in America, or one of the most important cities in the world, it was still very basic in the way it was done. I feel grateful that I got to live the transition from the fully analog world and live in that fully analog world and into the digital world, because there were some. It was a magical time, and so he was right at Times Square, right at 42nd Street, and it had all this crazy energy. I'd say 42nd Street at the time was all movie theaters, only showing XXX movies or kung fu movies, and right, that's all it was. And but it still had all of the sort of things that had been there since the 40s. The Winston ad with it blows out the steam, the guy's smoking, and it had this energy and this magic, and also it was incredibly dangerous and seedy at the same time. But it was really cool to get to spend so much time and with my dad at work. And as far as it making me want to become an actor, well, my first professional gig, I guess, we used to have to do at Channel 9. All the kids of the people who worked there would come and do the Christmas promos. So on behalf of my family and the entire WOR family, we want to wish you a happy holiday season, right? That was the first thing I ever did in front of the camera. And I remember being so nervous the first time I did it. Then you try to wait to see when it was going to air. He would find out because there were so many kids who of the people who worked there. So you knew on 4:36 p.m. on December 27th, your promo is going to air. So you'd watch it. But then through Joe Franklin, because of he was such a institution and everyone came on, he always had access to. He'd go to every opening night of all the Broadway shows, and then he always got extra tickets. So I think predominantly most of the shows that I saw probably were tickets that Joe had given my dad, and so I got to see a lot of an amazing theater, which was, profoundly transformational for me. I mean, I remember seeing the original cast of Pippin in 1975. And, but I think, and then we got to see the show that really, I often think this was the one that had the most profound effect on me. The original production of Sweeney Todd, the Stephen Sondheim.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It was amazing because
Didn't Johnny Depp play it in the movie?
He did it in the movie. Yeah. Yes, exactly. He did it in the movie. But in the original Broadway cast was Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou. And I just remember the theater was, and this was the 70s, even though New York was in this, it was a very strange time. It was artistically so alive and so magnificent. And so I remember you'd seen traditional plays where the curtain's drawn and traditional musicals, the curtain's drawn and the orchestra is in the pit, and they, you hear the overture and you feel all those butterflies and that excitement of the show starting. But this was this really crazy thing. It was like, I think it was the Uris Theater, and there was no screen. There was, no curtain. And they pulled the set, went all the way back to sort of the bricks and the bones of the theater, and they built this sort of cast iron industrial revolution, very bare set, and then they had this revolving piece that came in the middle that where the pie shop and where his barbershop was. But it was stark and it was open, and you're already in a mood. You're feeling this late 19th century England industrial revolution, and there's something very hard about it. And then the steam whistle goes off, and that's what starts it, and it jolts you, and you're in it. So it was the first time, and I just remember, it's my favorite musical of many musicals. And that was another thing. My dad had an extraordinary collection, I guess my mom and my dad, but of musical theater, of LPs. And my earliest memories are just laying on the floor at 5 and listening to Barbra Streisand and Funny Girl and playing those LPs. And that had, so all of the raw materials for making me want to become an actor were all there. I'm listening to musicals, and yes, my dad's in television, and I'm going down to Times Square and the theater district all the time, and all of those musicals and plays that I saw at that time profoundly affected me. I remember them better than most of my childhood memories.
What about any movies or TV shows at the time?
Yeah, movies were huge, and it's interesting too, because that time is very evocative for me, having grown up there. So all of the Lumet films, still my favorite film to this day is Dog Day Afternoon.
It's a good Al Pacino. Yeah,
it's really good. John Cazale and Al Pacino, and
it's a story too, I think, right?
It's a true story. Yeah, based on a true story, right? Yeah, he robbed a bank so he could help his partner get a sex change operation, and it's an amazing movie, and it's a beautiful piece on New York. Then all those Lumet movies from then are profoundly influential. Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon, and of course all of the 70s. I feel very fortunate that I got to grow up then. Because it wasn't artistically, it was a profoundly fertile time. In music, obviously. I always joke with my friends when you go, when some Rolling Stone or whoever will come out with like the top 100 songs of the 70s. Like, how could you possibly do that? You can't. And it's
so
just
many.
Well, because it's in every genre.
Yeah,
in every genre you have country music, in soul, and disco, in rock,
disco,
punk, and it's amazing to think how much music was created in sonic landscapes that we'd never seen before. Heard before. Sorry, we'd never heard before. That the Beatles, first came on the scene 62, 63, and my God, by 76 we've got the Sex Pistols, and and it's amazing how much it happened. And popular music in the 70s, but I even think about all this, just the regular rock bands that now, it's such a different time. And so my the younger people can get upset with me now, but I go, like, if you made the best 100 songs of the last 10 years, they'd be okay. But I don't think but it's also, you don't get to pick the time you live in. So there are always these incredibly fertile times. And then there are these fallow times. We could have all grown up in the era of marching band music, and, John Philip Sousa is the best thing going. But the 70s were this incredible time. So we'd come out of the 60s, which, obviously been revolutionary in the change in music and the change in culture and the change in politics. And then it was just so fertile in every realm. So much great theater, but I think most of my favorite movies are all from the 70s. And it's been fun. My daughter's 13 now, and it's been fun. My wife and I are going back and showing her all these movies, and seeing the ones that hold up and the ones that are timeless. And just think about All the President's Men, and Godfather, and Apocalypse Now, and all those things.
Deer Hunter.
My God, yeah, Cimino. Just watching Taxi Driver, I hadn't seen it.
That's a good one.
Oh my God, it's so good, because I had
Still holds up really well too, I think.
beyond, and you also understand why De Niro is such a huge star because what he brought to that, he's so vulnerable. He's incredibly vulnerable. So all of his aggression comes out of this fragility, and it's just achingly beautiful. I mean, Scorsese, I mean, and then the first movie that they did together, Mean Streets with Keitel, I mean, so much great stuff was happening. And I think what's so different then and was unique about that period is these movies that we would consider independent or auteur films, and with music, it was all done within the corporate system. So big
Hmm.
studios are making those movies, and
Hmm.
big record
True.
companies are putting out those albums, right?
Right.
And it's interesting that there was a hunger and for that depth, that quality, that realism, because that's also, I think, what really made the 70s unique was all of the great. So let's pick a genre. Let's movies. All of the revolutions in acting and directing that had happened in America in the 50s through the actor studio and all of that kind of stuff now had come to fruition. And you've got these directors, I mean, all these amazing directors, are all going to school together. You got Lucas and Spielberg and Coppola and Cimino and Scorsese, of course. And they all know each other, and they've been inspired by the European New Wave stuff, and they're making these beautiful, gritty, realistic movies that were. It's interesting because they were they were profound, and they weren't escapism, and then by the end of the decade we were like, all right, we've had enough of reality, because life was hard. That's the other, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I was thinking
yeah,
that same thing when you're talking.
yeah,
I'm thinking all those
yeah.
70s movies, they're all so serious and dark. There wasn't a lot of good comedies in the 70s. Now in the 80s, I feel like it was all comedies. And then in the 90s, it went back to like the Pulp Fictions and the Fight Clubs. It was more like the gritty, like dark films.
It's interesting. I mean, I've heard smarter people than I have talked about why you can have these periods and why we're allowed to reflect, and then why we want to escape. I mean, it's very. I mean, the thing is, I mean, the business has changed so much too, because with those movies, with say a Godfather or something like that, they didn't have to have an opening weekend. That all changed
Hmm.
with
Yeah.
Jaws and Star Wars and things like that, where suddenly you needed an opening weekend and you needed this blockbuster things. Movies were allowed to build slowly by word of mouth. And so something something unexpected could catch fire, and it had the time to grow and then become iconic. I mean, all these movies are iconic and profoundly influential. But then I think life was hard. I mean, the 70s were, for me, growing up in New York City, I mean, New York City had gone bankrupt, and it was incredibly dangerous and falling apart and crime ridden, but at the same time, profoundly creative. So there was all this great
Hmm.
theater on Broadway and music scene. I mean, obviously, one of my most favorite music scenes is the New York punk scene. Everything that's going down on downtown and CBGBs, and then the beginning of hip hop, and then how punk morphed into you know to alternative and new wave and post punk. It was a creative time, and I think, and maybe part of it, as we're talking about it too, is that there was time. Now there's not time to build things. Before the internet, you had the luxury of, you had a scene. So the Midwest had a scene, and the Deep South had a scene. So you could be in Athens, Georgia, and you could be the B-52s, and you're playing, or REM, and you're playing at University of Georgia all the time, and you start to build up your chops. And by the time someone gets, your record gets handed off to some DJ somewhere else, and like, oh, this is amazing, and then that word of mouth spreads. But now, you can record a song in your bedroom and launch it to the world immediately.
But
So
it doesn't always usually happen that way.
no,
It's weird. It's like a
yeah,
catch 22, because I feel like, yeah, it's easier. You don't have to have a record label and all that, but then it's like there's so much more competition now. There's so
sure,
many movies and TV
sure,
shows and bands and podcasts. And I mean, like you were Joe Franklin, there was like 3
right,
talk shows, 3
right,
channels. Now there's like how
exactly,
many I mean, it's almost too much. It's crazy.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's something magical about the egalitarianness of the technology now. The fact that, I mean, because if you wanted to make a movie, if you were a young filmmaker 20 years ago, you had to buy film stock and you had to get a camera, and it was incredibly expensive to make a movie. I mean, now
Mhm.
you can make a movie on your phone. And I mean, even as a frustrated teenage musician, I mean, shit, if I'd had GarageBand, or access to all of the online plug-in instruments and that technology and that ability to record a song. Man, I had a 4-track cassette recorder, right? So every time you laid down another track, it just got shittier and shittier because the quality
Yeah.
would degrade. Um,
You
so
played
it's a
music? You sang or play guitar, or what did you?
I did. I played. I was. I mean, I still play guitar. But yeah, I
Okay.
mean, yeah, it was when I was straddling the line between musician and actor for
Oh, okay.
my preteen years and then my teen years, and then acting just won out by about 10th grade. It just seemed that was I was an enthusiastic musician, but I wasn't particularly great or good. I mean, I really love it. And in my later life, in my 40s, I got back into it again, started a
Mm.
band and got much better, got my chops down, and I still love it. I mean, I'll be recording stuff tonight, after dinner, after everyone else is watching TV, I'll start, laying down some stuff, which is great, so, but yeah, so I mean, my first I played. I had a couple of. We played the eighth grade dance. My eighth grade band, Black and Blue, and but that was a disaster. That probably is what scared me away from music for a little while because we had like 2 songs down really really well, and then we got we auditioned to play the seventh, eighth grade dance, and then we kind of thought we had maybe 20 more ready to go, and they just really weren't ready to go. And it's so funny too, because I think about gear and the world. When I was first buying a guitar, so this is like 1979, 1980, you go to 48th Street in Manhattan, and there was Manny's, and there was Sam Ash, and the original Sam Ash, and there was Manny's, and there were a couple of vintage places, which to this day I still regret, because you could probably buy like a 1950s Les Paul in there for like $300, right? There was, because no one wanted them, right?
Dang.
Because in 79, 80, right, that's when the BC Riches are coming in, and people want and then Eddie Van Halen's come along, so everyone wants colorful guitars.
Right.
You could have bought like a Les Paul. I remember still, I can picture every Les Paul Jr. with those P90 pickups in the window there, and you're like, they were literally like $200. I mean, that's why Johnny Thunders in the Dolls, and then Heartbreakers on his own, because he was spending so much money on heroin. That's why he always played Les Paul Juniors. No, because he's like,
That's funny.
right, because they were the cheapest guitar to buy, but they look so fucking great. But anyway, so I used to go to Manny's, and Manny's was sort of the original big music store, and all the bands would go in there. Zeppelin would go in there, everyone would go in there, but all of the gear, all of the guitars were behind glass, and
Mm.
they would never let a 12-year-old play them. You could look at them,
Mm.
but then like you had to just hand over cash to even get a hold of that guitar. So I wish I'd grown up in the Guitar Center era, where you could just go in there and play Enter Sandman for as long as you want, right? But it's
Yeah.
like but so much, we're talking about that dance. So there was, the only guitars they had out were these sort of low end Japanese knockoffs of this company called Hondo, not Honda, but Hondo. and,
Interesting.
and I bought this SG copy that was, I swear to you, if it held its tune for one chord, it was a miracle, right? You'd hit the first chord and it's completely out of tune. I even changed the tuning heads on it and all that kind of stuff. But so that didn't help during our show.
Mm.
But when I was first in bands in like 8th grade, we were spending much more time with band politics than actually like playing music. We were into all of the other things. So you spend most of the day just kicking people out of the band, and then trying to hire people to be in the band. And then you can never find a drummer. No one ever wanted to play the drums, and it was always hard to find a bass player. So we'd always get one of our friends who had a little more cash, and be like, hey, we take them downtown, we take them down up 48th Street, and be like, hey, buy that bass, and we'll teach you how to play the bass. How hard can it be? But yeah, so the 8th grade dance was a little traumatic, and then by 10th grade I was fully committed to being an actor. But
Yeah.
I'm a frustrated musician. deepest
Okay,
cut.
that's cool. You have you
Yeah.
can still go back and play it now and stuff.
Oh
But
yeah,
obviously, the acting paid the bills, so that's
it paid the bills, and it just seemed like I mean, it. I'm built for it because I think it's probably I have a very low attention span or a short attention span, and I like changing, and going. So I always thought when I was a little kid, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. It's like, oh, I'll be an actor, and I can be all of those things. But I also think, I'm a natural ham, and it's probably the only thing I'm really good at. So I mean, and I'm only moderately good at it. So, but luckily,
well,
it's paying the bills.
you're pretty good. Yeah, I mean, when was your first like paid acting gig? It was you got like an agent in high school, which is crazy to me.
I did, but that's also, we're talking about New York City. That was kind of the magic of growing up in that city. So I was very fortunate that I had this incredible theater program at my high school in Manhattan. And the year that I started as a
Trinity
freshman,
school or something like that, right?
Trinity School, yeah, exactly. And the year that I went into ninth grade into the high school, there was a new head of the drama department, this guy named Michael Gilbert, and he was amazing. And he kind of just overhauled the entire program, and we were doing amazing plays. We're doing The Crucible, and I did Amadeus there, and we're doing big musicals. And to this day, I don't think I've ever enjoyed any production as much as I enjoyed those productions back then. And there were so many good actors there. But one of my best friends has gone on. A bunch of people from my class and from the classes around me have gone on to become professional actors or professional writers or directors. So it was a very creatively fertile time. And the other thing about it was it's New York City. It's a private school in New York City. So it wasn't like really if you were playing, you weren't going to become a professional baseball player or soccer player from any of those teams. So the plays, though, attracted girls from all over the city. So it was also socially really advantageous because, I mean, obviously, I think, most people get into acting because they enjoy pretending and they want to meet people to make out with. Right. Come on. It's like that's yeah. So, but yeah.
Why does a guy do anything?
What is a guy, girl? Like, I mean, it's just exactly. But that was definitely a prime motivator. But yeah, and then I was very fortunate. We're doing the Diary of Anne Frank, and one of the people in the cast, they were friends with a manager, and that person came to see the show, and I got my first manager my senior year in high school, and that afternoon, I auditioned. The afternoon after I met them, I did my first commercial audition and got that. And so I thought it was always going to be like that. That was it wasn't. That was a very rude awakening. But yeah, and then I've been doing it professionally since I've earned a living at it since I was 16, 17.
Yeah. So then like with the Trinity School and Juilliard too, there must have been a lot of people that you were classmates with that went on to do great things or famous or whatever. Yeah. What about, was there people that like at Juilliard, you think everyone's going to make it? Is there some people that didn't make it that are just quit the arts and did something else? So what do you think happened there? Did they lose their passion or?
It's so interesting. It's a crazy business, right? And, I think about this more and more, especially as I get older, and I'm definitely contemplating teaching. And I certainly now, my joke is I used to be the youngest guy on every show I'm on, and now I'm the oldest guy. So suddenly, just by dint of making it this far and surviving, I have some sort of implied wisdom. So people are always asking for advice, and it's a tough business. And like, I know so many incredibly talented people who don't work as much as they should or never worked. But it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of, being in the right place in the right time. And also just keeping your shit together. Because I think like, someone asked me the other day, like, advice you gave actors, and I gave something sort of hackneyed, but then I realized I thought about it as I was contemplating what I said, and I realized the most important thing you need to do as a professional actor is you need to have some sort of control and command over yourself and your ego, because it's a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes it's a perpetual advance, and you're constant, and that's great, but that's very rarely how it is. And someone smarter than me said the patron saint of actors is Sisyphus. And do you know the myth of Sisyphus?
No, I'm
So,
trying to
so,
blank.
so it's one of these. It's a Greek myth where he was cursed by the gods. He was punished by the gods. So his every day he had to roll a rock up the hill, and
Oh, okay.
every night the rock rolled back down, right?
Right.
And that's it. You roll the rock up, and I've had so many big breaks, right? I've had lots of things where you go, okay, this is it. I think I can coast for the rest of my career. And it's never that. The business changes, you change, you get to a place where like, we don't know what to do with you, or you need to, so you need to understand that it's not personal. That's the number one. It's really hard not to take things personally.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been really, really, really lucky. I have paid the bills and raised a family and worked as an actor my entire career. In fact, I often feel that I curse myself because I remember at Trinity, I had my plan for the future. I go, I never said, oh, I want to be a star. I want to be this. I go, I want to be a working actor. That's all I want to be. And I remember saying that to myself very clearly in my senior year of high school. And I don't know if I created that or if I just realized that's what I would be, or I don't really know. But I've been fortunate enough and cursed enough I'm a working actor. I work. But there are periods where you go, I don't know if I'm ever going to work again.
Yeah, so I
And
was going to ask you about that. Like, how
yeah.
long are the breaks in between acting jobs for shows and movies? Like, do you sometimes go months, and then are you auditioning during that time, or is there some time where you just sit around and wait by the phone? And I mean, there's times where maybe you think it's over at that point. Like, how long does it go?
Well, I think all actors think it's over every time. I think if you finish a job and you don't have another one lined up right away, I think most people assume it's over. Sometimes you're in the middle of a job and you're like, I think it's over. I think
Even
I've
with that
blown it.
massive resume you have, like all these
But
credits.
it's so funny. I worked. Do you know the actor Charles Durning? Are you familiar with talking
Yeah,
about? Yeah, so talking about Dog
yeah,
Day Afternoon, he played the cop in Dog Day Afternoon. He was Jessica Lange's dad
okay.
in Tootsie. One of the greatest actors of all time. Just an amazing. I think he's probably won an Emmy, a Tony, and an Oscar. He's just an incredible actor. And I worked with him on this show that I did, Homicide. So I did a show called Homicide: Life on the Streets back in the
Mm-hmm.
90s. And I'm sitting next to him in the scene, and he has to deliver this 2-page speech, and he delivers it the first take, and it's magic. I'm just like, this guy is amazing. And he delivers it the second time, different and equally brilliant. Does it the third time, and he goes, okay, that one was good. And I go, Mr. Durning, they were all amazing. He goes, yeah, but that was the only one. That was the first one I did where I wasn't worried if you thought I was any good. And I
Huh.
go, and I said, it never goes away, does it? And he goes, it never goes away. So there's a, because to be an actor, to be a good actor, I think you have to have a certain vulnerability, but then to do your work, but then you have to have this. Stella Adler, a famous acting teacher, said an actor needs the heart of a rose and the hide of a rhinoceros. But those are hard things to keep going at the same time. So part of that sensitivity and that vulnerability that makes you good at this and is also, you're going to have a degree of self-loathing and it's funny because the more when I was younger, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable having that conversation about, insecurities and things like that. But as you get older and you realize, no, there's strength in talking about your vulnerabilities. And now you can have those conversations. And I haven't met an actor yet where you talk about this and they don't reveal that. And the ones who don't feel that way are probably psychotic.
Well,
And
so if you're playing like in the what's the movies I just watched, The Leverage, okay? So you're
right,
playing this pharmaceutical billionaire
right,
who's a piece of shit, right? But those
right,
guys like don't have a conscience.
right.
I don't think they're getting worried about what people think of it. So how do you
No.
play that character? I guess that's acting, right? Because like you have a vulnerability and you're pretending like you don't give a shit, like it's all about you, a total narcissist, right?
Well, that's the best part. I think that's the best part about being an actor is you get to, I play, certainly in the last 15 years, I play only like these horrible people, like bad guys. And people meet me and they're like, you're so nice. You're so nice in real life. I'm like, yeah, this is my chance to sort of exercise that id, that part of you, because we all have all of those qualities qualities within ourselves. But there's no way in my real life I could ever treat anyone the way any of those characters treat them. So it's fun, and you have some sort of insight into it. So I mean, there's nothing more fun than playing a bad guy, because they've got.
You try to make the bad guy somewhat likable, or you just go all in and go, this guy's going to be a freaking asshole. Like what?
I think the reason that I get cast often as bad guys, or sort of characters who you're not sure about, that they're morally ambivalent. I think the reason often I get cast in those parts is because I am likable. So they're not completely heinous, right?
Mhm.
Because you could just play and also I think too, as an actor, I never approach a character like they're the bad guy, right? So even the worst person on the planet probably thinks they're pretty good. And so, especially if they're a sociopath and, a captain of industry. So they're just fun, because, I mean, the Leverage one, that was hilarious, because I'd prepared. I was really obsessed with the Sackler family and everything that was going on with Purdue Pharma. It was in the news.
Oh, yeah. I saw that. The Michael Keaton show. Was that the one that was highlighted? That's crazy.
Yeah. So I was fascinated by those guys. And so when I got cast in Leverage, I wasn't really hip to the show. And so I started, and it was one of those, it was my first job after lockdown. So I had like 2 weeks to prepare, which was amazing. So I spent all this time creating as if I was going to be in a Scorsese movie. Like I was really, I created like a whole character background. I'd done a whole diary for him. I was like really, and I created this basically, a Sackler. And I get there, and we're shooting the first, because this is the first day of shooting, and they're back, and I see people hiding behind potted plants, and they're doing, it's much broader. And I was like, oh, I've prepared for the wrong show. And so I talked to one of the actors on the show, and I go, oh my God, I thought I prepared for, like, as if I'm doing a Scorsese movie. And she's like, no, this is Scooby-Doo. We're doing Scooby-Doo. And then
that makes sense too, because when I'm watching, I'm like, I was going to ask you, is it supposed to be kind of campy?
Yes. So that was great. That was like, because it was like carte blanche. So I was like, so all my preparation, I'm like, rip. And I go, but then if it's Scooby-Doo, I get to play my most fun villain. So I had the best time on that show. Cause like, if it's Scooby-Doo, then you can.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So then my motto. Go ahead.
We're watching it. Yeah. And I at first I didn't really know which way, if it was going to be more serious or more Scooby-Doo, but I think the part where I realized, that's interesting you say Scooby-Doo. They go into this computer room, right? Or there's a couple computer screens, and there's like a sound effect, like a doodle-doodle-doodle-doodle. I'm like, I haven't heard computers make a doodle-doodle-doodle sound since, like, I don't know if they ever did that, but definitely in like Knight Rider in the 80s, they would do those sounds. And I'm like, dude, computer screens in 2020 do not go doodle-doodle-doodle when you look at them. I mean, it was really campy. I was like, oh, this is kind of funny.
It's funny, and it was so much fun to do. So, that's another, you always have to remember, and now, I'm constantly relearning lessons. And so you have to really know the genre of the show you're doing, but it ended up being tons of fun.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, like with Homicide. So like, that's always fun, because what kid hasn't played cops and robbers? Every kid does that. So do you practice like your moves, like your gun moves like this, and like your poses, and you're showing the badge and all that stuff? Cause you're friends with cops, right? So did you have them show you the right way to do all that stuff?
Well, that's a really funny story. So, actually, it reminds me, talking about New York and growing up in the 80s. One of my first performances as a cop was at an Irish bar when I was 16. So, the difference between New York City and especially in the 70s and the 80s is like, at 14, I could go into bars. I had braces on my teeth and I could go into bars. Right now, the drinking age was 18, but it was still like, it just was, New York had bigger problems. They weren't enforcing that kind of shit. And so now I'm like 16, and I'm in a bar. I was on the east side of New York, big Irish bar, old school Irish bar, not like these new where everything's in Gaelic. This was just fluorescent lighting and the best beer. No one drank Guinness. Everyone drank Budweiser. And if you could afford it, and it had a little cafeteria, hot plate thing in the front, so the food would be like, you literally bring a tray through, and all these old school Irish bars, they're all gone. They're all like the Blarney Stone. I think this was the Blarney Stone. It'd be Dublin House. They had all of these names, and they were amazing because they were truly Irish bars. They're run by Irish people, filled with Irish people, but it wasn't sort of this thatched cottage Gaelic Irish bar that's now pervasive. It was just it was the real deal.
Legit. Yeah, that's cool.
Legit. I mean, like, in fact, when
My grandpa's 100% Irish, so I know all about, yeah.
Exactly. And my wife, and we got married in Ireland. My daughter's got an Irish name. Like, no, same thing. But I remember because my last neighborhood in New York was Hell's Kitchen when it was still Hell's Kitchen, not now. And I think they've returned it to Hell's Kitchen. But there was an Irish bar there because they used to have these snugs too. And snug would be like, it's just like half a building. Which is an old Irish term too, like a snug, but it's like a tiny bar. Like it's just wide enough for the door, the bar, and a seat, right? And you come in there. there was one where like they didn't even have anything on draft. Like you just had got cans of beers. But the first time I played a cop, I was in I've been surrounded by cops. I always found New York cops really fascinating. So we're at this bar. We're at, I think, the Blarney Stone. And one of my friends, another actor guy, theater guy, he pulls out this fake badge. And he's like, look at this fake badge I got. I was like, oh, give me that. And I saw there was a table of, I'm 16. I'm in fucking junior in high school, but I see a table of kids who are definitely a year younger than us. So I go over there and I'm like, I'm going to need to see your IDs. I flash them the badge and I pretend to be a cop and I card all of them. And I was a fully immersed, committed performance. Like one girl's talking back to me. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You're out. I kicked him out. And I was like, and I know that the bartender saw me doing it, but he was having a laugh because he knew me. But I kicked like two of the kids out.
Are these kids that bullied you, or are you just having fun?
I was just having fun. Now later they got their revenge on me because it was like 3 months later. I'm standing at the bus stop outside that place, and a kid pokes their head out that door, and they're like, "There he is!" And like 3 of them came out to me, and that was my first street fight. But that's another story.
Oh shit!
Yeah, they would. But yeah. So when Homicide came along, it's interesting because I graduated Juilliard and I'd done my first Broadway play, and now I was done. New York. I'd grown up in New York. I'd lived there. I'm gonna go out to Los Angeles, and I got out to Los Angeles, and this is 1992, and I had this sort of existential crisis, which I think a lot of actors go through, where you're going, "What am I doing? I'm not contributing to the world. Mm-hmm. I think I want to become a cop." And so I befriended all these LAPD guys, and I'd hang out with them, and I was reading every book on real life police stuff, and I'd gone on this ride along with an LAPD guy that I befriended in Watts, and it was funny because all the cops that I met, they all wanted to become actors, and I realized, I'm an actor. That's really what I'm supposed to do. But I go, I sort of set this intention for myself. Not that made it happen, but I was like, I just want to play a cop truthfully on TV. That's my goal. So then I still spent the next few years, I was obsessed with it. I'd research it. And so when Homicide came on the air, I remember going, I want to be on that show. I want to be on that show. I remember watching the pilot, and Andre, who played Frank Pembleton, I'd gone to Juilliard with him, and I was like, I want to be on that show. And so my favorite actors, were on that. Ned Beatty, come on, John Polito. And so I remember I got the audition for it. So this is after their second or third season, and I got the audition. And back in the early 90s, everything that I went up for, because I used to have blonde hair before it turned gray. I had blonde hair, blue eyes. Every description of every character I read for, they go, we want a Johnny Depp type. He was the template. And I was like, oh, I'm definitely not a Johnny Depp type. But I go, I've researched this character. I know who it is. Like if they're willing to cast a blonde, blue-eyed guy, I'm going to get this part. And it was an amazing scene, beautifully written. And I got it. And I show up there. And I think much to their initial dismay, they had written me. Tom Fontana told me later, and I remember reading, he designed my character as a frat boy with a gun. Right. So okay. I think I was brought on to bring some sex appeal, some irreverence, something like that. But I had a whole other plan. And so I'd be like, oh, I don't know. I think I should do it this way. And so like all of that desire to play a cop truthfully on TV mixed with the best writing, that one can imagine, and this incredible cast, it sort of morphed. And then that character had this sort of extraordinary trajectory. So, but I didn't, so to answer your original question, I didn't do any pulling out my badge or my gun in the mirror. But because by that point I felt like I was in preparation for this, when I thought I was going to become a cop, I had gone, because I grew up in New York City, I'd never really handled guns. I used to go to the shooting range once a week, and I was firing all the guns the cops would fire, because I was like, I knew that when I got on set, I wanted to look good I wanted to be able to handle a gun properly and all of that kind of stuff. So in a weird way, I prepared for that character for like 3 years before I got it. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, so that's obviously that's a big role because you're going to do multiple episodes. But like when you have kind of a smaller part, like in Moneyball, and you're playing a real life person, do you get to research it? Do you reach out to Mark Shapiro? I mean, that's a great casting job, by the way, because I looked at him and I looked at you. I was like, you look like Mark Shapiro. Like it's a pretty good casting job.
You know, it's really funny. It just depends. Like sometimes you were talking about, we said that leverage story. And what I always want to say to younger actors is, you may have a way of preparing, but you're probably going to have to change it for every job. You kind of need to know how you work.
Yeah.
But what worked for the last, and I only learned this the hard way by sucking a lot, like, you know, but with the best of intentions, but making similar mistakes. It's like, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So each job is different, and you can get inspired by many things. So I could have been cast having not done no research for Homicide, but just having an image of something or a song lyric would get me in the moment, and I'm ready to go. For that one, I happen to prepare, but like for Mark Shapiro, they cast me. I know nothing about sports. I'm not a sports guy at all, right? I mean, I read Michael Lewis's book, and the script was amazing, but I knew who the guy was. I had a real sense of who that guy was. And then when we went in to do it, it was the first scene of the first day of shooting. And before that, because I've been doing so much TV, it was the first movie I'd done in a while. Because it was going to be the first scene on the first day, so we shot on a Monday. On that Friday, we came in to do rehearsal. Now, I'm such a TV veteran that we're doing 10 pages a day. We're never rehearsing. There's no time. You know, you've got to get it out. So I was like, rehearsal? How are we going to rehearse this scene? And Bennett Miller, the director, had the script written by Sorkin, and then Brad Pitt came in with his own version of the scene. And this is a testament to who this guy is. So usually if another actor's rewritten the scene, they've probably given themselves some pretty juicy shit to do. He hands me this much bigger scene, and he'd given me all the stuff to do. He'd written me all these great parts, right? So he's a super mensch. But then when we got there on the day, we just improvised. We did the script, but we improvised. When we shot it on the first day, we shot Brad's coverage first. So the camera's pointing at him, and we improvised from the time we got on the set until we went to lunch. So for like 6 hours. And we shot that movie on film. So Bennett would sit underneath the camera. And when we'd just keep going until the mags ran out, until the film ran out, and they'd have to reload, and we'd go again. And it was magical, and Brad was amazing. And we'd improvise, and we did crazy shit, like stuff that was never going to make it in the movie. Like at one point, I'm pretending to be Captain Kirk because he compliments my chair. And I was like, those guys with the red shirts, they won't be here next week. You know, but it was fun. And then we'd work in the dialogue with the improv. And then when we came back, I remember going to lunch, and all the background guys were like, "You're amazing. You're killing it." I'm like, "I haven't killed it yet. I haven't even been on camera." And I was like, "It hasn't happened yet." So I was really nervous. I remember being at lunch going like, "I don't know if I can improvise for another 6 hours." But then we came back, and Bennett would call out. He basically sort of gave each of the sort of improv stems or threads a title. He goes, "Do the Captain Kirk one. Now do this one, do that one." And then it all came together. But this goes back to what we were talking about, the 1970s movies. The method to his madness was by improvising and doing it so much and getting so comfortable. And that's why I think that movie is so spectacular. All those performances are amazing. Is no one was acting. No one was acting anymore. They'd stopped. No one was on the words. They were in the moment. And that's aesthetically, as a audience member and as a actor, that's what I look for always. I don't want to see acting. I don't want to see a performance. I want to believe what's happening in front of me, even if it's happening a billion miles away on another star system. I want to believe it's really happening in front of me. And he was able to bring that aesthetic because, you know, the 70s really brought that to the mountaintop, and we've lost. It goes and comes depending. I mean, obviously the new golden age of television that we're in right now and streamers.
Mhm.
I think that's really brought that back. I mean, you know, watch a show like Ozark, or you watch The Wire,
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of stuff where you're seeing world-class acting. But yeah, I didn't have to research Mark Shapiro. Even in fact, they didn't want me to. They were calling him Mark Shapiro too. And I'm like, I think it's Mark Shapiro. That was the only,
Shapiro. I got it wrong too then.
No, but that was the only research I did. I was like, I was nervous to say, like, hey guys, I think his name is Mark Shapiro. And they're like, it is. It is Mark Shapiro. But then sometimes, but the research is the fun. It just depends on the job, because I think that's also what's exciting about being an actor is you're exposed to worlds and periods that you never would have even thought about. So, you know, my first movie was this movie called Memphis Belle, which is about B-17 bomber crews in the Second World War. So suddenly I had, and that was the old days, I had like 3 months to prepare. I knew everything about B-17 bombers and that period. Cool. So it's amazing to immerse yourself in that. But you'll even just this leverage thing, part of it was I got really into the artwork that he collected, and I started learning about artists I didn't know about. So you get
cool.
So that's fun. Those are sort of ancillary. But as far as preparing, it really depends, because for me, one of the biggest changes that happened in my career was I'm halfway through. You know, this is so in the late 90s. I was sort of hitting a rut. I was doing a lot of television, episodic television. And what would happen is I'd gone to Juilliard. I'd studied with all these amazing teachers, and they were like, you need to prepare and you need to do all of these things. All of these things have to be done before you can show up to work. You need to know this and do this about your character and know what they had for breakfast in fifth grade. And you're like, I don't have time, because half these jobs I get, they're calling me the night before and they're like, hey, can you be in New Orleans tomorrow and play this guy? And I'm like, and I'm starting to feel really insecure and I'm feeling really tight on set. And I befriended all of these amazing improv comedians from Chicago in LA in the late 90s. And I started going to all their shows, and then I started getting back and doing it. And that's how I'd started. I'd started really at Trinity. My best friend, who's an amazing improviser, we just improvised all the time. And by doing comedic improv shows, it reminded me a couple of things. That first of all, you can just have a word or a sentence and you can create a whole show out of that. And it brought me back to what really inspired me initially as an actor, because when it's just playing a kid's game at an adult level. It's just playing pretend. So like, Chuck, I mean, if you and I are, you know, we're 8 years old and I'm like, okay, you're the king of England, I'm the king of France. You'd be like, okay, I'm the king of England. Oh, I'm the king of France. You wouldn't go like, oh, sorry, Reed, I'm not quite sure what the king of England would wear and how I need to go away and come back. Right.
There's something to be said about that too, because isn't that how De Niro prepares? He has like these notebooks where he writes all these notes about things, and like he's doing something right.
Oh no, the thing is, it's all good. Whatever you do that gets you there, but you never know what it's going to be. So you also can remember that, like, yes, if you have the luxury of preparing and doing that, and it translates to something emotional on the screen, not something intellectual, that's great. I love it. I love to prepare, but also you need to know
time is what you're saying.
But if you don't, you can create it. And then it got me a lot looser in from take to take. So, because what often happened, you know, you'd get sort of locked into a performance, you'd want to repeat it. And now, I mean, certainly since then, I want it to be different every time, not trying to, and I'm looking for the mistake, because the way I think about it is, if you and I are in a scene, I could have planned something the night before in my room, right? Just even like this conversation's an improv. Like, I could have planned stories I was going to tell you, but they're going to sound a little stale. But then you and I vibing off of each other, it's that one, it's not 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, 1 + 1 equals infinity. Because if we're in the moment together and I pass you the ball and you spin the ball to me and we throw it, like, suddenly it's not we couldn't have planned it, because it only existed because we did it. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that mistake. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the fuck up becomes the scene and becomes really the key to the character or the key to the movie. I can't tell you. I mean, just that improv, something that happens in the moment, is so, because it's magical and it's alive, and it really, you know, it goes back to what we're saying. It really is happening. It's happening right then. It wasn't intellectually conceived of, and it's magic. It's you being open to the muse coming down from wherever it is and being transferred through you. And And I think, musicians are like that. And, people like, you hear about guys writing songs. They're like, I don't know where it came from. I just started playing and it came out.
Yeah, I hear
And
that a lot.
right. And I think it's the same thing, just acting. Now, preparation is, I always think of it, it's like, it's the chairlift to the top of the mountain. So whatever you need to get to the top of the mountain. So sometimes, I need to do a lot of things. I need to change the way I walk. I need to change the way I talk. I need to know certain things. So sometimes I need to do research. Sometimes I don't. But once I'm at the top of the mountain, then I'm just on the ski run, and you just got to pull all that behind you. And I mean, at least that's how like I said, that's how I like to do it. And I think if you think about it as a kid's game, just playing pretend, but you're just doing it at an adult level under shitty circumstances, Well,
like, because your latest thing that it's not out yet, but the Gaslit show, that's a big one with Julia Roberts and Sean Penn. And then I think you're playing Deep Throat. So like you have to obviously know the details of that whole. I don't know all that. I'm excited to see the show because I know the story obviously, but I don't know all the details. And that's like, I bet I'll learn a lot from watching that.
Well, that's a perfect interjection on that, because like that production, that job was the shining example of that. Now, I'd done a ton of research. I'm a Watergate nerd. Talking about my dad directing the news, Watergate was sort of my formative political experience as a five-year-old. Like I knew all those characters inside and out, and I was obsessed with it, and it really sort of changed my worldview. And I wish I could have easily had instead of baseball cards, just all the characters from the Watergate scandal cards, right? And traded those. So when I got called to do it, I was so excited. I knew all these people, and so I did do a ton of research on Mark Felt, which was really helpful. But then when we got to set, Matt Ross, who's an amazing director, I went to Juilliard with him, and we did Goodnight and Good Luck together. I'm working with him and these incredible actors, John Carroll Lynch, and we started improvising. So this wasn't what happened. And then he's like, "That's it. That's the scene." And so then we went out, and you'll see it when it happens.
That's
but like
interesting. So you don't want to. He doesn't want to make it exact. See, because that's always the problem I have with these true story things. Is like there's too much improvisation. I want it to be exact. Why do they always have to take so much?
Well, here's the thing, because it's very interesting. First of all, people don't know exactly what the conversation was in those rooms, right? But
that's true.
But what you want to feel in certain scenes, and obviously they didn't change any of the facts. None of the pertinent information changed. But if a moment of behavior or this improvisation can actually better illustrate the relationships between the characters, that's much more powerful. And you're right there. So, the best way to put it is like, you're not taking any liberties with history. You don't know what they said, but now you actually understand the scene better. Then you're not reading a transcript, and it's
true.
And if it's
more
done,
natural,
and it has to be done, though, it has to be done. And they didn't do it all over the place, but it's interesting. It actually, more than just doing a transcript, it brings the scene alive, and you have a better sense. Because what I love about Gaslit, which is why I think the show is going to be so exceptional, it's not the mythology of Watergate. It's not about Woodward and Bernstein, and it's about all of the other characters who were very important. John Dean and John Mitchell and their spouses and Martha Mitchell and all of these other players. This Watergate's become a mythological part of our history. So the people who spoke out, of course, as always happens, become sort of some hagiography, right? Their intentions were always noble. They wanted to save democracy. And that's not really how people fucking operate, right? So the thing is so now you see that, no, most people are motivated by self-interest and fear, and that's really illustrated there. So the more you can make those people feel real by improvising or finding a moment that isn't necessarily historically accurate, but as if, The Crown isn't a documentary, but you feel like you know who those people are. It's just his interpretation of what those scenes must be like behind those closed doors that no one's ever revealed. So it can be, but also improvisation is, it can only be used, it has to be used by professionals for professional use only. Don't try this at home, because yes, it's because you've to answer your bigger question, it's because you've prepared. Because sometimes, you'll work with an actor who's not ready to go. They don't know their lines. So like, we're going to improvise. Like, no. You need to know it so you can forget it,
Right.
or move on from it. So if it's done with tasty people who can pass the ball well, then it's pretty magical and it's fun to be part of.
Yeah, sometimes I watch movies or scenes
Right.
and it seems like they're improvised. I just watched a movie. It's kind of a more indie movie. It was called Beta Test with Jim Cummings, and I was like watching the guy, and I'm like, I want to ask him, like, are you improvising this scene because it seems so natural? I don't know what takes more talent, improvising it or making it look like it was improvised because it seems so natural.
Right. Well, I mean, it's really sort of the same thing. You put it brilliantly, because you're not gonna, if you're doing Shakespeare or Chekhov or a great writer's work, you're not going to change a single word. And your job is to make it really truthful. And then with some scripts, though, you're not dealing with Chekhov, and a little nudge here and there can actually make the writer's work even more powerful. But still, even if you're using the dialogue, I think that the written dialogue, there's still the aesthetic of, you're still improvising within those parameters. As Sanford Meisner said, you're living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, and what you do doesn't depend on you; it depends on the other person. So you're just in those circumstances, the given circumstances of the scene. The words are there for you, but if you're truly present, they're not going to come out. They're not going to sound like lines on a page. So when acting is executed, well, oftentimes, especially on network television, you can see the lines on the page. You can see every moment is spelled out, right? It's very clear. And that works for that genre, but that's not really what I tend to look for. And I think, people really respond to. You wanted to see it happening in front of you.
Yeah. So what is, like, with Bennett Miller, is he one of your favorite directors to work with? Is he kind of encourages that improvisation?
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, I've worked with so many great directors, but that was a really exciting experience, just because it's dangerous and there's a certain level of difficulty which makes it exciting and fun. But then ultimately you just feel really safe. It creates a great environment. I mean, because I always feel, as I think about teaching acting or talking to younger actors, like, lots of people can act. Acting's not, everyone's, so many people are funny, some people are smart who can pretend. The only thing that separates a professional actor from everyone else is they have to do it under, honestly, the worst circumstances and under pressure. So, and, I always think, if I had one piece of advice that I would give an actor, it's like, whatever you think it's going to be like on the day, it's not. I mean, down to, so I can't tell you how many times you think, oh, this is the most important scene, we're going to spend 3 hours on it. And they're like, okay, we can only do this in one take because we're losing the light. And you're like, you got to go. Right. Or if you're playing a scene in the Bahamas, I guarantee you it's going to be 40 below where you are that day. Right. So nothing is what so you have to really be disciplined about knowing that it's not going to be like what you imagined in your head, and you have to do it. You have to do your job under adverse circumstances. People who don't want to be there, or they're going like, oh, we don't have time. We got to move on. Everyone's stressed, or someone else is having a bad day. It's never going to be ideal. And then every once in a while, you just have this perfect experience where everything falls into place, and it's an amazing playground to play in. But those are truly the exceptions. Most of the time, it's challenging, but that's also why it's done by professionals. And you're there. I mean, I guess I could say this. I just did
Better Call Saul.
I just did Better Call Saul.
Yeah, tell me about this. What can you say? Anything?
All I can say is, it's one of the greatest characters I've ever gotten to play. I couldn't wait to do it. But
is it more than one episode?
I can't say anything. But all I can say is, I did my first scene, and it was a big one, and we didn't get to my coverage. Now I'm talking for like 6 pages, just 6 pages of me talking. Didn't get to my close up until like I'd been there. It came at 5 in the evening. I don't think we got to my close up till 7 a.m. the next morning. So I've been there, I've been there for 14 hours, and I've been talking for 14 hours, and people around me are just falling asleep, and you're going like, oh, but you have to pretend every time's the first time, right? That's the challenge of an actor. So and you dig deep. All you want to do is go home and go to bed because you're wrecked, but you're like, this goes back to that Moneyball story when people are like, oh, you did a great job. I'm like, I haven't done it yet because until they film my face doing it, it doesn't exist. And you gotta dig deep, but I mean, people always go, how do you learn the lines or how do you shoot it out of sequence? So like, that's the easiest part, right? It's just, I can't tell you how many times, my wife, who's the best actor in the family, she's the real professional, but she's just come out of retirement about 2 years ago and she's been working now constantly. But I told her, and she'd hear my stories, and she told me like how many times she's had to do her close up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you've been there for 12 hours, right? And that's, this isn't, look, we're not saving lives, and this is we're not firemen. It's not, but I'm saying like as far as being a professional actor inside baseball, it's just, I think that's what the difference is you have to do it when it's not ideal.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're a David Goggins fan, right? So like, he always says like, your comfort zone is poison. So that's a good thing, right? You're supposed to step out of your comfort zone, and that's when all the magic happens.
It is when all the magic happens. I mean, it's even like, how you asked earlier about like, do you go through periods where you're not working? And so of course, and it's always because I have something to learn. There's something new you've got to do, because you'll get into a rut too. Like, so they'll see me as a lawyer. So I played lawyers for 5 years. And then like, if I want to not play a lawyer, I'm going to have to show them that I'm something else. And you got to put your big boy pants on and go out there and audition and fight for it. And I remember a much smarter guy than me who told me the Sisyphus myth. He goes, your problem is you get the rock to the top of the hill and then you're like, oh, you don't feel like pushing it back up again. And you have to remember, you're always going to be pushing it back up. So as soon as you get your head out of your ass and you go push that rock up again, great things happen. And it's true. And it's now, talking about Goggins, it's exciting. I'm 54 years old and I have as much energy as I did more probably than when I was 20, because I'm still in it. You're still fighting, and it's exciting. And I fell in love. I fell in love with acting all over again when I started improvising. And then there was a period where I was doing a bunch of stuff and I wasn't as in love with it. And then I found my love for it, my passion for it again, like 4 years ago. And I've just been on this ride of doing all these great things since then. And like, that's why I said, like, you really have to master yourself and your ego and thinking where you should be. And, oh, I should be here. And I did this. Why do I have to? And the business changes, people don't know who you are maybe, and you got to prove yourself to them. And there's there's dignity in that. And there's muscle. There's muscle to be built, and you got to keep that muscle strong. I have a friend who's a very, profoundly successful businessman, and I was talking to him about this before I sort of like got back pushing the rock up the hill, and he's like, I never rest. I never feel like I've arrived. And he goes, it's death. And I was like, oh yeah. And because that's the ego. I was like, hey, I'm here. I've been on TV for a bunch of years. I've been on this show. Why aren't you, why isn't this being handed to me? And sometimes it is handed to you, and that's great. But there's also
just that one role.
Yeah.
You just need that. Like, there's so many people like you that do all these roles. And then it's like, I remember William H. Macy had been acting for like, 14, 15 years. And then he got Fargo, and he's like, I'm so glad I don't ever have to audition again. Like, and he didn't. He was like, he was made it at that point.
Yeah. Well, you go through, but that's the thing, is like, you go through periods and you get addicted to that, because there was a whole period where like, I don't think I had to audition for like 10 years. Right. And because things were coming, but then you're going, okay, the business changed. I'm older. I'm in a different category, or they're looking for different types of people. And so you just have to go, all right. And there's something that feels really good when you do fight for it, and then you get it, and you remember like, oh, I got that muscle, because that's what got me started in the beginning. Like, there was nothing that was going to be too challenging. I would say, yeah, you're just like, yeah, I'll go get those. I remember my first real, not commercial job, but my first professional job after starting commercial, I did an after school special and they wouldn't release the script, and there was no
Date
fact.
rape? Is this still on?
Date rape, God bless you. You're hilarious. So they wouldn't. There was no computers. There's no faxes, and they would. So if you wanted to read the scene that you were gonna have to audition for, you'd have to go there and get it. So I went there. I walked over there in the heat of the summer of New York, down to like there was somewhere on the Hudson River. I got my scenes. I walked over to behind some warehouse and I learned it, and then I went in there and did it. And I was like, you were able to do that. You can still do that. You can still fight, because that's who we are as humans. There's no resting in the natural world. Wolves don't get a day off, right?
I think there's a big thing to be said for momentum. I learned that as doing podcasts, because I would get a big guest and then I'd be like, okay, I deserve a break now. Like I just got to, and it's like, but then it's like you kill the momentum, and it's like, no, I need to keep going. I need to get the bigger guest after that.
Yeah. No, I love that you're talking about this, because I think it's really important, because I think we're built for struggle, and it keeps you stronger. It keeps you sharper.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but I mean, trust me, there's moments where like, I got to pay for school for my kid. Like you're like, but you do.
Yeah.
And I've been very, very, very fortunate. And that's also what makes it exciting is go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, was there ever any roles that you came close to that would have been life altering that you can talk about? Or was there any that were big roles that maybe you turned down and then it turned into a big thing and you went, shit?
Well, there are auditions that I refused to go to back when I was young and stupid that turned out, to be star making roles for the person who did go. But they weren't my roles. They were their roles.
Really?
And I think that's the most.
Can you say what they were?
I didn't want to audition for Noah's part in ER, because I thought the character was wimpy. That was one famous one. I was like, oh, I could have been on ER. I could be like staying at one of my 7 houses. But I think this is more important. And it's so much fun talking to you. And like, but I think this is the theme. You talk about ego and who you are. Like, a lot of actors get caught up in like, oh, I'm better than that guy. Why did he get that part? Or like, oh, what's wrong? I'm a really good actor. It's like, it's not it. That's not what it's about. Like, you have to be right, and you have to be in the right place, but you also have to be the right guy or the person, or, you have to be the right person for the part. And it's just, when it's right, it's right. And that's what, how you asked brilliantly at the beginning, like, what do you miss by not, or lose out by not going into the room? That's one of the things, because that is very powerful, where they can feel your essence and you're like, yes, that's the guy. I can't tell you how many jobs, Journeyman, a bunch of jobs, I got it, just walked through the door, because the way that the molecules were exchanged between me and the creative people, like, he's the guy. But so now, but no one's taken your part, and it's a hard thing to remember, because there's lots of really good actors out there. And yes, you can do that thing that, we all do when we're young. Like, I could play everything. Like, yeah, you can play everything, but you're not going to get cast in everything. It's a business,
Right.
And that's, in fact, my number one piece of advice I give to the younger actors that I work with. I'm like, make your own stuff, because you can. And, I'm probably too lazy. I know I should be doing more, but also, like, I grew up in a different time, or I came up in a different time. But now, like, I always say, like, I'm still defined by how people define me. I go from job to job. I'm a journeyman actor. I'm a working actor, and I love it. But you could define who you are. You could show them who you are, the way Joel Edgerton does, or, there's so many great people out there who've created their own, think about Fleabag, like Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Like, look what she did. She's like, here's who I am. And now I'm a freaking, I'm a powerful and brilliant, person in this business. Like, so
like Lena Dunham from Girls, like, she's just like, she didn't like lose a bunch of weight, and like, she's like, here I am.
Yeah. And
she's a great writer. Jesus.
Oh, my God. Yeah. And that show. Yeah. I mean, look, so that's it. So, you can wait for the phone to ring, or you can create something.
You've written some stuff, right? You've written some screenplays and some TV pilots.
I have. Wow. You're good. I've written some pilots, and I continue to write, and I'm constantly developing other stuff. But it's like, I mean, I love acting, and I always say I've been cursed with moderate success. So I can, it kind of always works out.
Well,
Uh,
it's moderate. Like what? So, like with the Agents of Shield, is that
yeah.
like a lifetime of being able to go to Comic-Con though? At least, I mean, right? There's going to be people that worship you just from that show for the rest of your life, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate to be in the Whedonverse and to be on, in the Marvel verse. So that has definitely opened all that stuff up, and I love that. I mean, I certainly love. I love going to conventions, and I love meeting fans, and that's a fun perk. But why wouldn't you want to spend? I do one the Starfury events in England. I've gone over in there and done those a couple of times, and those are the best because you get to spend like a whole weekend there with a bunch of other people from other Whedon shows or other Marvel shows, and then you're partying in Blackpool, and you're with sort of this picked group of fans who've paid to be there. And so, but what could be better than hang out with a bunch of people who think you're cool and and want to hear your dumb stories. So,
Yeah.
and so I love all that. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm doing great, and I've been really lucky to be super busy during COVID. But like I was saying, my manager she called me the other day, and she's like, what's so exciting about this business and what I've always loved about it. And she's amazing. She's a woman named Stacey Abrams, really just changed my life. And she's like, what's exciting is you never know what's coming next. And that's the beauty and the terror of it, but it keeps you alive. Right. And I never know. And you can't predict what show is going to be an amazing experience, what show's not. And like I say, it keeps you vital. It keeps you on your toes, and it's exciting. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we go, this is it. This show is going to change the world. I remember we're making Memphis Belle, and I remember guys on the show were picking out their Oscar tuxes, right? Like, we're getting Oscars for this thing, right? And you just never know. And then you do something, and then boom, it just connects. But
so what do you think your most underrated show or movie that you did, like that you wish more people had seen? I know you said Journeyman was one of them that was the most fun. Is that one, or would you pick a different one?
I think, it's Journeyman was, that was one of those where we wish it ran for 10 years. That was because the group that was assembled was from the top down. Kevin Falls, who created the show, and I've done 3 or 4 other shows with Kevin since then, Franklin and Bash and Minority Report. And that was one of those where they've been pilot season casting for my part for weeks. And I walked in near the end, and he said, the second you walk through the door, I knew you were the guy. And we've been connected ever since then. But Journeyman was such an amazing thing because Kevin McKidd, who played the lead, we played brothers. My wife and I had been obsessed with Rome. We'd been watching it for like 2 years before. And every time we'd watch Rome, my wife would say to me, she goes, you have to play Kevin McKidd's brother. She was like, you look like brothers. And so I remember when I got the audition, like, it's to play Kevin McKidd's brother. I'm like, well, I'm getting this one. But
That's a lot. Yeah.
It was a lot. But that was one of those where everyone from the top down, everyone involved in the production was just wonderful. And it's funny because in the old days, productions tended to be a lot more problematic. There wasn't, and there was a lot of bad behavior that was encouraged, and a lot of bad behavior that you were allowed to get away with back in the day because there was no social media. There was the networks, the studios weren't as hands-on. And then as the business model changed, a lot of the bad behavior went away. But I realized that you want to be working with people you want to be with. Because especially when you're doing a TV show, you're there 14 hours a day, right? But and Journeyman really changed it because we were just all so in love with each other, and we were just having the best time. And it was just one of those things with a writer's strike, and NBC wasn't completely behind it at the time, and there were some regime changes, and it just didn't click. But we still every year we all text each other on the day that it premiered on the anniversary. We're like, oh my God, what if it was still going? Remember? But those you never know. But I mean, it's not really for me to say what should have been more lauded. I mean, I've always been amazed. I feel very lucky that I got to be part of Homicide, right? Because that was the end of a certain era. You talked about the 3 networks and the time, Fox was coming in with X-Files, so there's 4 at the time, but people were still trying because they were trying to make prestige TV on networks, right? And now then right after that, HBO kicked in, and then the streamers and all that, and basic cable, and the landscape really changed. But Homicide we were trying to make a HBO show, which they eventually did make the next iteration, The Wire, on HBO. We're trying to make that on a network. And, it's funny too, because we were always on the bubble of getting canceled because we were only getting like 18 million viewers on a Friday night at 10, right? 18, 19 million.
Good. Yeah.
It's look, Mad Men finale gets 2 million, right? So it's just like, it's the numbers have changed, right? It's a different world. But I was always, it never, not for me personally, but I always wanted that show to get nominated it never got nominated for Best Drama. It was, and so I feel like they should have gotten it, but I'm not really think that there's anything that I was on that should have been recognized further. I've been really lucky. And
I think Wayward Pines was pretty good. I feel like, but I think like what happened was the second season, it kind of fell apart, but that first season I think you were in the first season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That first season it was so good. It was like an old Twilight Zone, really so intriguing. And then I think they just like, well, where can we go with this now? Like it's already kind of been revealed at the end. And
well, I think on that one too, if you read the books, you should do yourself a treat.
Oh, there's books. Okay.
Oh yeah. So Blake Crouch, who wrote it, because I remember reading the pilot, and I go, I'm so into it. The pilot was amazing for Wayward Pines. And I go, well, I guess I'll find out what happens when I get the job. And then I thought, oh shit, I don't know if I'm going to get this job. So I immediately downloaded his book, and I didn't even get out of my chair. Sat in my chair, and in 3 hours I read the whole book. And it was amazing. But that show, interestingly enough, that was the most problematic show that I've been on in modern times. And if you notice, the reason the second season is so different from the first season is they killed everyone off. And I think that was intentional.
Okay.
Yeah, so we could start fresh. Yes. So I mean, that's just my, it's my outside opinion. I was very happy when I got the script that I was being killed. And because you're not always excited about that. Because that's the career downside to playing bad guys is when you're a bad guy, for sure, you're not surviving.
Right. Okay.
That's why I got very excited on Designated Survivor when I realized, I'm a good guy on this show. And then they killed me, blew me up in a nuclear explosion in a subway station.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta ask this though.
Yeah, man.
So you brought up Franklin and Bash. Mark Paul Gosselaar, huge Saved by the Bell fan. How close is he in real life to the Zach Morris character? Is that like a stretch for him to play that, or is he like basically Zach Morris in real life?
You're gonna kill me. I've never seen Saved by the Bell. I have no idea I have no idea what Zach Morris is like.
Really?
I do know.
You got some homework to do.
I guess so, man. That was the 90s, man. I'm in my 20s. I'm not watching.
Yeah, that'd be a little creepy, I guess, if you were watching that show in your 20s.
But all I could say is he was amazing. He and Brecken were amazing. Franklin Bash was another one of those, because Kevin Falls created that show and Bill Chase with him. And I mean, for me, that one, it was all about getting to work with Malcolm McDowell too. I mean, that's the magic.
Oh yeah,
that's the magic of this business, is you get to meet so many incredible, extraordinary people and heroes.
Did you get to work with John Lithgow when you were on Memphis Belle? Because I know he was in that, but.
Oh yeah,
dude, that's a guy that I would just like spy on and go try to figure his technique, because he is so brilliant at dramatic and comedic acting. That's really hard to do.
Oh yeah, he's a freaking powerhouse. I love, like, oh my god, I love him. I mean, his Churchill talking about the Crown was it was transcendent. I love that guy. Now, and they're all great guys. I mean, it's funny because the worst thing that ever happened to being on set was your phone. And because what ended up happening, the best part about actors, and being on set in between takes, is people tell stories, and actors always have the best stories, right? And but at least Malcolm, he didn't disappoint. So on Franklin and Bash, he would just tell me, and I would just pepper him with questions. I just wanted to know, and he's had such an incredible career, and he would just tell me all of his,
Did he have any Kubrick stories?
Of course, he had tons of Kubrick stories, and all the horrible, because he was part of that whole group of all the crazy British actors. He's telling terrifying Oliver Reed drunken stories and all those things that I just love. My favorite part, one of my favorite days on Franklin and Bash, was John Landis directed.
Oh yeah, from Animal House and
Animal House,
so many, American Werewolf,
Blues Brothers, all that stuff.
Yeah,
and directed the Thriller video. So I'm standing there, and I've got John Landis here, and I've got Malcolm here, and they're just trading off stories. I mean, just topping each other. I mean, John Landis tells some outrageous story about Michael Jackson Madonna trying to seduce Michael Jackson, and then he'll top it with another one. And I'm just like, oh, please don't let this stop, because that's what you love. I mean, one of my fondest memories ever, I did an early TV movie I did with the great Joanne Woodward. And Joanne Woodward happened to be married to this a little icon called Paul Newman. And we're shooting in Pittsburgh. It's Laura Linney, it's me, it's Joanne, and Paul. It's a Sunday afternoon, and we're just going to have a beer at some restaurant somewhere in Pittsburgh. I don't know, and he just starts telling the most wonderful stories. Like and they were all, which is also great, with really. I think he's one of the greatest actors of all time, but every story was about how bad he was in this play or that play, how he messed up. And you just love it because you're like,
what?
You're the greatest.
Newman is saying he sucks?
Well, of course. And that's why you love him more, because he's self-effacing. Just like, so's Clooney, so's Brad Pitt. That's like the best.
Really? Clooney tells stories about sucking.
That's all he tells. He tells about like getting fired off of Roseanne, and because that's what you want. You want your icons to.
You don't want, and that's what's so funny, because when people start bragging about, and I'm like, the people that are really successful, they don't brag like that. Like, it's like you're compensating for something when you do that.
Of course, that's exactly what you're doing. You're totally compensating. And, I remember, George Clooney, he directed me in this movie, Good Night and Good Luck.
Yeah.
I hadn't met him. I just auditioned, and he'd seen my tape, and I get cast. And now I'm on the CBS Radford lot in the Valley in Los Angeles. And he sees me. And he just comes up to me, and he's like, Reed, and he grabs me in this big bear hug. He's fucking George Clooney. And he goes, he goes, I'm so glad you're doing this movie. And I was just like, I would have done it. I would have jumped on a grenade for him at that moment. And that's he understood, like, what he was. He was one of the great. Talk about great directors. He was hands down one of the greatest directors I ever worked with. But he understood that he was George Clooney. He understood that I was probably going to be nervous to meet him, nervous to work with him, and he immediately diffused it.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
I love stories like that.
Yeah, no, he's so
cool.
Like I tell you, Brad Pitt brings in a rewritten scene, and I've been with actors who've rewritten a scene, and like, no, he's giving me more stuff. That dude never left the set. He's eating the sandwiches that are getting handed around like to the entire crew.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So he didn't have a stand-in? He he did the lines with you when it was your turn to have the camera on you or whatever?
Of course, he's the ultimate mensch, and we were just improvising together. And literally, I remember, just only because it was so empowering, and he's just such a super awesome dude. I remember we're talking about something. He's like, I like Reed's idea. Reed's idea is better. Let's go with Reed's idea. And I'm really like, this is no ego, right? Just wants to make the scene great. And obviously, the most successful people I've ever met, Joanne Woodward did the same thing to me that Clooney did. Because when I met her, I'm a young actor. It's probably my third job. I'm coming off of an overnight plane because I shot something in Toronto, and I'm landing in Pittsburgh, and I come to the first read through, and she's like, Reed, she said the same thing. She goes, I'm so glad you're doing this. And I'm like, you are? Oh, thank God. Like, immediately, you feel comfortable. And she understands. She's an icon. She's one of the greatest actors of all time. And you need to know your place. And you need to know too, we talked about earlier that acting, you have to do it under very difficult circumstances, but you don't have to make them more difficult. And smart people really know how to make people comfortable. I think about this all the time. And certainly whenever I've been a regular on a show, any guest star comes in, you go out of your way to make sure like they know that they're welcome there. And then we're like, oh, we're so glad you're here. I use those lines. I say, like, I'm so glad you're here. It's gonna be great. We're so excited, blah, 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 blah. Because it's, as Charles Durning said, I was worried, if you were going to think I was any good. I was worried if you were going to like me, he even said, right? And that's part of it. He said the sweetest thing, and Charles Durning, which makes this story so funny. He goes, the actor, it's like instead of saying the height of a rhinoceros, heart of a rose, he goes, it's like we're a little bird inside of like a little wooden, your heart is like a bird inside of a little wooden bird cage, and it's very fragile, and you have to be careful. And this is a war hero. This man landed on D-Day, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, was severely wounded 3 times, machine gunned, but bayoneted, and I believe he had his throat slit, and was returned to and return to combat after each of those injuries. Those are those golden ticket injuries that usually get you out of the combat zone. And this man is like, I was wondering if you guys were going to think I was any good. And you're like, wow, it's.
We need some more people like that, right, in the world today, right now. Jeez,
I know, right? Well, that's it, right? A man's man. What was, looks like there's a few men out there. But yeah, no, and that's what it takes. Like it's as you said, like if you're talking about yourself and it's all about ego, you're overcompensating for something.
Yeah.
Because those are the worst actors. Those are fun stories. They're always fun stories. I mean, the people who, because there's two types of actors. There's the one like that improv thing, like we're all going to rise together, right? The better I make you, the better I am for you, the better you're going to be, and the better I'm going to be. I come from that ethos, that theater ethos. Like I always use a soccer metaphor. I go, the assist is even better than the goal, right? If you can put the ball where that guy needs to get it into the net, how amazing is that? You set him up to win, and I believe in that. But then every once in a while, and it's much less and less, but when I was much younger, especially, you'd work with actors who were like, oh, the way I'm going to be better in this scene is by making you worse. And those are fun stories. They're fun to talk over about beers.
You try to kind of be like a jerk for a while, and then you're like, yeah, this isn't me.
This was it. So I just am this, right? Like I'm happy, I'm ebullient, I'm a team player. But I showed up on that homicide set, and it was pretty rough going. And at the time, I counted myself to be a bit of a methody actor. So I go, okay, this is what it'd be like if I was the young cop. If I was the new cop, I'm going to be getting shit from tons of people. But there were some pretty intense personalities, and there was there was one scene where I remember both the other actors just stormed off and went to their trailers because I'd said to the director said to me, he said, hey, because they'd always pick me out, the new directors, because they'd get all these guys who were independent filmmakers and they'd give them sort of their first TV gig. And so everyone would all these new directors want to pick me to talk to at lunch before they start their episode because I seem like the most sort of open, cheerful guy. And they go, do you have any advice for directing TV? And I was like, well, when actor X and actor Y are on set, just don't tell them what to do. Ask them what they want to do. I remember cut to the next on Monday morning. He's like, I want you to come in here and I want you to come in here. And they're like, boom, boom, both gone, right? They're out of there.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there was an actor that, because on Homicide, I won't name any names, but these stories are still just as good. So the beauty of Homicide was it was all.
I can do the math.
Yeah, probably. The camera was all handheld, right? So, and it was literally handheld. It was a handheld camera, 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
So the beauty of that, and Clark talks about this all the time. Clark Johnson, who played my partner, one of the greatest directors of all time, amazing guy, amazing actor, amazing human. He's, what was great about that is everyone had to stay in the scene. There was you couldn't go out of the scene. You had to, back to what we're talking about, that aesthetic of really being present in the moment and playing off the other person, because you never knew when the camera was going to find you. The other thing that happened on that, because of that, there was no traditional coverage. And by that, I mean, we're not going to do a master, a 2-shot, and you're single. You're not going to get your close up. So one actor definitely wanted his close-ups. So he had 2 tricks that he would do, which were great. They're great. I mean, I love horrible, mean actor stories, but his favorite one was he had 2 tricks. He would either not know his lines. So during the scene, he would never know his lines. So you couldn't use his coverage. But then suddenly they go, okay, well, we got to get your lines. So they'd go into a single, and then he'd know them all perfectly. He'd know, right? So that was genius. And then the other thing was, because we'd shoot a lot of scenes in the interrogation room in the box, he would go to the window and look out the window and deliver half of his lines out the window. So then, of course, they'd have to come to the other side of the window and just give him a nice little close up. So those, I mean, it's very, I mean, I always admire it. I admire the game, or no, that's not the game, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game. So I admire the players. I don't hate the game. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I hate the game. I don't hate the player. I'm fascinated. But to your question, yes. So I was like around all of these pretty intense personalities, and there was a lot of strum and drang and behind the scenes machinations. And I was like, I'm going to be a dick, and I'm going to try that on, and it just failed miserably. I just wasn't any good at it because it's not your nature, and I truly believe, like, the essence of this is being who you are, and that was an important sort of evolution for me in my growth as a man, as a human. I was like, no, you just got to be who you are. You're a nice guy, and you like to get along, and sometimes it's not going to be like that. And then after I sort of made that change, then I came back and I made all these amazing friends, these improv comedians who were just the sweetest, nicest people in the world. And then I had only pretty much great experiences since then, except for like Wayward Pines was like being thrown back into that fire. It was like a full homicide bananas thing. I remember one of the actors had like a 3-page monologue to do, and really nice, really interesting cat. And he just went into his trailer and just, just did a couple of massive bong hits, and then came out and decided. And we were on location. We had hundreds of acres. We had hundreds of extras, and then decided he wasn't going to do that 3-page monologue. He was just going to sing a song instead. And I loved it as a person who's in the moment. I was like, this is great. It's fucking genius. It kind of works, but like, this isn't the script. And that was the nicest of those crazy experiences. But
did the song make the cut of the final thing, or did you have to?
I don't think so. I don't even know if I couldn't even watch the show because.
Really?
It was a little cray. But that was one of those where I realized, there's a lot going on here that I'm not up to this, and they're much better at it. I talked to an actor. This was my favorite line ever. I was talking about my kid, and this actor said, "My career is my baby." And I thought, oh, there you go. I can't compete with that. Like, my baby's my baby, and my career. I go, you win. Yeah. But they make fun stories. I mean, now I tend to have many. I mostly only have delightful and wonderful experiences.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Geez, we're over an hour and a half, so sorry to take up so much of your time, but this has been a blast.
No, Chuck, dude, it's such a blast. You're so much fun to talk to, and I really love your show. And I was just watching the Nuge.
That was that guy's wild.
I love that guy. I mean,
I do too. I don't know.
You don't even need to be there, right? He could just talk the whole time. He's fantastic.
Yeah. I don't have to do anything. Yeah, for some reason I find him fascinating. But I always end with a charity. Is there a charity you want to promote here?
Well, for a long time I've been a supporter of Japigo. I don't know if you're familiar with Japigo. It's women's health and reproductive rights and frontline healthcare workers in Africa. And that's
okay.
That's a really. But it's funny. I was thinking about it, and so I've worked with Japigo for years, and they do amazing work, empowering women and with their reproductive rights and with their care and.
So when you said the Africa thing, does that have something to do with the what is it they call that, like the female circumcision stuff? Are they trying to fight? Because that's like a really weird thing to me. You're really aware of that?
I'm very aware of that. But I their main thrust is to reduce infant mortality, and and so many mothers still in 2022 are dying in childbirth, so they're dealing with that. But thinking about that, it's interesting. I was thinking about you said you mentioned a charity at the end, and I realized I spent the last year driving across the United States. Because during lockdown, the first year I was working, when I was doing Leverage and doing Bosch, I got separated from my family because my family's here in Canada, and I was working in the States, so I couldn't come home because there was no vaccine and there was a 2-week quarantine. Yeah. And so then this year, when I got my first job shooting Girl in the Woods out in Portland, we drove there, and then we went from job to job, and we drove all around the country. And since then, I've driven mostly all around Canada, and I definitely want to get started with a charity if I have to bring in my own. I know there's ones that exist, but the amount of food deserts that we see in this country, I mean, you're thinking like food deserts and clean drinking water. I mean, there's 2 things that are going on right now that are blowing my mind. Flint doesn't have clean water, right?
Really? They still don't? They didn't fix it?
And you can't imagine how many communities you can go into right now where no one's got access to anything but fast food. And I know Wendell Pierce has done amazing things with the food deserts, but I'm just spitballing. But I realize it's a cause. It's dear to my heart because nutrition's everything. How you eat, is how you develop, and in fact it affects your mood and how you live in the world, and the fact that you don't even have access to anything for miles around or hundreds of miles around that's healthy. Yeah. So, but Japigo and then stand ready for my food desert charity that I'll be developing.
Yeah, let me know when that hits. Yeah. That's a great idea. I love that. I always wonder that too, because we do a lot of driving around road trips, and I'll be driving through this town. I'm like, how do they get groceries? Like, I know there's a Family Dollar, but I don't think Family Dollar has like full on groceries. Like, they have like packs of hot dogs and TV dinners. Like,
Exactly.
I don't know. I always wondered that. I mean, I don't know. It's, yeah, one of those things. Hopefully, you can fix.
Yeah. Well, I think we all need, there's we got to take care of the people here. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
Dude,
so much, Reed. This has been a blast. I had a lot
Chuck,
of fun.
Absolute blessing. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and I love talking to you, and I look forward to doing it again.
Okay. Yeah. You'll come back when you're the Better Call Saul comes out. That'll be fun.
All right, brother. Sounds good.
Okay. Sounds good.
Have a great
See
day.
ya.
All right. Cheers.
You too. Bye-bye. Wow, that was a lot of fun. And sometimes you just click with a guest and it's like you're talking to an old friend rather than a guy that you just met. And I definitely felt that way with Reed. I enjoyed our conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. Thank you to Reed for taking the time. Shout out to Steve Cooper from Cooper Talk for helping set that one up. Make sure to follow all three of us on social media to keep up with all the fun stuff that we're doing. And look out for Reed's new show, Gaslit, with Sean Penn and Julia Roberts. And also catch him on Better Call Saul, although he can't tell me which part he's playing or how many episodes. But I'm going to watch the whole season anyway. So if you want to support my show, your likes, shares, and comments go a long way. And please make sure to subscribe wherever you watch or listen. And if you want to go that extra mile, you can always write me a review on Apple Podcasts or rate me on Spotify or wherever you listen. Thank you again for all your support. Have a great rest of your day. And remember to shoot for the moon.